The rain fell in heavy sheets over New York City, the kind that blurred the edges of buildings and drowned out the hum of traffic. Rachel Miller stood beneath the awning of a cafe, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag as she watched the downpour. She had always hated the rain. It reminded her of the night she was sent away, bundled into a car with nothing but a hastily packed suitcase and a note that read, "Take care of her." She had been 5 years old. The Browns had been kind, in their own distant way. They gave her a room, an education, a name, but never love. Not the kind she craved anyway. The only warmth she ever felt came from Ethan, the family's youngest son, who had been the one to find her crying in the garden that first night. He had been just a boy himself, barely 12, but he had crouched beside her, offering a handkerchief and a promise. "You're safe now." Rachel exhaled sharply, shaking off the memory. Safe was a luxury she hadn't known in years. Not since she left for college, not since she built her own life far from the Browns' cold mansion. And certainly not now, as she stood outside the hospital, bracing herself to step back into the world she had tried so hard to escape. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Eric. "We need to talk." Her stomach twisted. 3 years together. And he had waited until now to betray her, until her godfather was under investigation, until her company's most valuable research had vanished overnight. She had trusted him, loved him even. And he had sold her out without a second thought. The sliding doors of the hospital hissed open, and Rachel forced herself inside. The sterile air clung to her skin as she made her way to the private wing, her heels clicking against the polished floors. She didn't need to check the room number. She already knew. Ethan was waiting for her outside the door, his expression unreadable. "You came," he said, as if he hadn't expected her to. Rachel swallowed the bitterness in her throat. "I didn't have a choice." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his coat and handed her a folded newspaper. The headline was impossible to miss. Tech Heiress's godfather implicated in bribery scandal, company in jeopardy. She didn't need to read the rest. She knew what it meant. "There's someone who can help," Ethan said quietly. Rachel looked up, and for the first time, she noticed the man standing just behind him, tall, impeccably dressed, with a gaze so sharp it felt like a physical touch. Luke Williams. She had heard the name before, of course. CEO of Williams Enterprises. Billionaire. Ruthless in business, relentless in pursuit of what he wanted. And right now, his eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Miss Miller," he said, his voice low. "I think it's time we had a conversation." Rachel didn't trust him. She didn't trust anyone in this city. But as the weight of her godfather's fate pressed down on her, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was out of options. The hum of the hospital's fluorescent lights was the only sound between them as Rachel studied Luke Williams. His presence was overwhelming, not just his height, or the way his tailored suit clung to his broad shoulders, but the quiet authority in his stance, as if he was used to people bending to his will without question. She straightened her spine. "What kind of conversation?" Luke didn't answer right away. Instead, his gaze flicked to Ethan, who exhaled sharply before stepping back. "I'll give you a moment," Ethan murmured, though the tension in his jaw betrayed his reluctance. He hesitated, then added, "Rachel, be careful." The warning sent a chill down her spine. As soon as Ethan disappeared down the hall, Luke closed the distance between them. His cologne was subtle sandalwood and something darker, something dangerous. "You're in trouble," he said simply. Rachel laughed, though there was no humor in it. "That's not exactly a secret. Your godfather's trial is in 2 weeks. Without intervention, he'll be convicted." Luke's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "Your company's stolen research is already being auctioned off to the highest bidder. And Eric Jones," his lip curled. "He's celebrating his payout in the Caymans as we speak." Each word was a knife twisting deeper. She had known Eric betrayed her, but hearing it confirmed so bluntly made her chest ache. "Why do you care?" she asked, lifting her chin. Luke's expression didn't change, But something flickered in his eyes, something heated. "Because I can fix it." Rachel's pulse spiked. "And what do you want in return?" For the first time, a hint of a smile touched his lips. It wasn't kind. It was possessive. "You." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Rachel's breath caught. She had expected money, favors, stocks, not this. Not her. Before she could respond, a coughing fit racked her body, forcing her to brace herself against the wall. The illness she had tried so hard to ignore flared, her vision swimming as pain lanced through her chest. Luke's hand shot out, steadying her. His grip was firm, his skin warm against hers. "You're sick." She wrenched away. "I'm fine." "You're not." His voice was sharper now, edged with something she couldn't place. Concern. Frustration. "You need treatment. And you need help more than Ethan can give you." Rachel's hands trembled. She hated this, hated feeling weak, hated that he could see it. Luke stepped closer, his voice dropping to a murmur. "Marry me." She froze. "What?" "1 year," he continued, as if proposing a business deal. "In exchange, I clear your godfather's name, recover your stolen research, and ensure you get the best medical care in the world." Rachel's mind reeled. This was insane. He was insane. And yet, she thought of her godfather, the man who had been the closest thing to a father she'd ever known, rotting in a jail cell. She thought of her company, the years of work about to be stolen. She thought of Eric's smug smile as he walked away with everything. Her throat burned. Luke watched her, his gaze unreadable. "Say yes, Rachel." She didn't want to, but she had no choice. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." Something dark and satisfied flashed in his eyes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, a diamond ring glinted under the harsh hospital lights. "Good," he said, sliding it onto her finger. "We leave for Paris tomorrow." Rachel's heart pounded. She had just made a deal with the devil, and she had no idea what it would cost her. The private jet hummed softly as it cut through the clouds, the golden light of dawn spilling across the cabin. Rachel stared out the window, her fingers absently tracing the edge of the diamond ring on her left hand. It felt foreign, heavy, like a chain disguised as a promise. Luke sat across from her, his attention fixed on a stack of contracts. He hadn't spoken since they boarded, just handed her a glass of champagne she didn't drink and buried himself in work. As if this were any other business trip. As if she weren't his unwilling fiancé. She cleared her throat. "You never told me why." Luke didn't look up. "Why what? Why me?" His pen stilled. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly he lifted his gaze to hers. The intensity in his eyes stole her breath. "Because you're the only one who ever looked at me like I wasn't a goddamn transaction," he said, his voice rough. Rachel blinked. That wasn't the answer she expected. Luke leaned forward, his voice dropping. 3 years ago, the Hamilton Charity Gala. You were arguing with some investor about ethical AI development. He called you naive. You called him a parasite." A faint smirk tugged at his lips. "I'd never seen anyone put Charles Kensington in his place before." Rachel remembered that night. She hadn't even noticed Luke in the crowd. "That's it?" she asked, incredulous. "You decided to marry me because I insulted a tech bro?" Luke's smirk faded. His fingers brushed the back of her hand, sending a jolt of heat up her arm. "I decided to marry you," he said quietly, "because for the first time in my life, I saw someone who didn't care about my money. Or my name. Someone who fought." Rachel's pulse thundered. She wanted to pull away. She wanted to lean closer. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, jolting them apart. Luke straightened, his mask of cool detachment sliding back into place. "Rest. We land in 2 hours." But Rachel couldn't rest. Not when his words echoed in her skull. Not when, for the first time, she wondered if this marriage might destroy her in ways she never saw coming. Paris should have been beautiful. The city of lights, of romance, of fresh beginnings. But as Rachel stood on the balcony of Luke's penthouse overlooking the Seine, all she felt was the weight of the ring on her finger and the ghost of Ethan's goodbye kiss on her cheek. "Be careful with him," Ethan had whispered at the airport, his hand lingering on her waist a second too long. "Williams doesn't do anything without a reason." She had laughed it off. But now, alone in this gilded cage, she wondered if Ethan had seen something she hadn't. The sliding glass door opened behind her. She didn't need to turn to know it was Luke. His presence was like a storm rolling in the air, grew heavier, charged. "You've been avoiding me." His voice was low, controlled. Rachel kept her eyes on the river. "I've been thinking about us." The word tasted bitter. "This isn't a real marriage, Luke. It's a transaction." Beat of silence. Then his hands were on her shoulders, turning her to face him. His grip wasn't harsh, but it wasn't gentle either. There was a possessiveness in it that sent heat pooling low in her stomach. "Tell me something, Rachel," he murmured, his breath warm against her lips. "Do you still love him?" The question caught her off guard. "Who?" "Ethan." His fingers tightened almost imperceptibly. "The man who threw you away as a child and only brought you back when he needed something." Rachel flinched. "That's not fair. Neither is the way you look at him." Luke's thumb brushed the hollow of her throat, tracing her pulse. Like he hung the damn stars. She should have pushed him away. Should have reminded him this was just a business arrangement. But the raw edge in his voice, the jealousy she hadn't realized was there, made her breath hitch. "You're wrong," she whispered. "Prove it." And then his mouth was on hers, hot and demanding. Rachel meant to resist. She wanted to resist. But the moment his tongue slid against hers, every coherent thought shattered. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer as he backed her against the balcony railing. The city lights blurred below them. This wasn't part of the deal. This wasn't supposed to happen. Luke broke the kiss first, his breathing ragged. His eyes burned into hers, dark with something dangerously close to need. "Tell me to stop," he challenged. Rachel's lips parted but no words came out. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Then with a curse he stepped back. "We have dinner with the investors at 8, he said coolly, as if he hadn't just kissed her senseless. "Wear the black dress." And just like that, the moment was over. As the door closed behind him, Rachel pressed trembling fingers to her lips. She was in trouble. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was pretending anymore. The black dress clung to Rachel like a second skin as she stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the hotel ballroom. Below her, Paris glittered, a city built on illusions, just like this marriage. Luke's hand settled at the small of her back, his touch sending an unwelcome shiver down her spine. "You're tense." She forced a smile for the circling investors. "Just playing my part." His fingers flexed against the silk of her dress. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Looking for him in every crowd." The accusation hung between them, sharp as broken glass. Rachel turned to face Luke, the champagne flute in her hand trembling slightly. "He's my family. Family doesn't abandon children in the rain." Luke's voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. "Family doesn't watch you sign your life away and do nothing." Before she could respond, a familiar laugh cut through the murmur of the crowd. Ethan, dressed in a tailored tuxedo, his golden hair catching the chandelier light. He looked every inch the prodigal son returned. Rachel's breath caught not with longing, but with sudden, startling clarity. Luke's grip tightened. "I see." "No," Rachel said, watching as Ethan made his way toward them. "You don't." The confrontation happened in slow motion. Ethan's too bright smile. Luke's glacial politeness. The way their handshake lingered a beat too long, knuckles whitening. "Rachel." Ethan kissed her cheek, his lips lingering near her ear. "We need to talk. Alone." Luke's arm slid possessively around her waist. "My wife has obligations." The word wife landed like a grenade. Ethan's smile faltered. Rachel's stomach twisted. And then the breaking point. "I can't do this anymore." The words tumbled out before Rachel could stop them. She stepped out of Luke's embrace, the diamond ring catching the light as she pulled it off. This was never real. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Luke's face went frighteningly still. "Rachel," Ethan started. "Not you." She didn't look at him. Couldn't. "I'm not choosing you, Ethan. I'm choosing me." For the first time since she'd met him, Luke Williams looked uncertain. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this ends now." She pressed the ring into his palm, her fingers steady despite the storm in her chest. "I won't be another transaction. Not for you. Not for anyone." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Luke did the one thing she never expected. He laughed. A rich, genuine sound that made her pulse stutter. "God, you're magnificent." Before she could react, he cupped her face in his hands. "Tell me to walk away, Rachel. Right now. And I will." She searched his eyes, really searched, and saw the truth she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. This was never about deals or debts. It was always about her. Her choice. Her heart. "Stay," she whispered. And when Luke kissed her this time, there were no games. No pretenses. Just a promise, whispered against her lips as the world faded away. Always. Epilogue. 1 year later, the headlines told different stories. Disgraced executive Eric Jones sentenced for corporate espionage. Brown family fortunes restored through new tech venture. Luke Williams spotted canoodling with wife at charity gala. But the most important story wasn't in the papers. It was the quiet mornings in their Manhattan penthouse, when Rachel would wake to find Luke watching her like she'd hung the stars. It was the way he still kissed her like it was their first time and their last. And it was the note she found taped to her coffee cup one rainy Tuesday. "You were never part of the deal. You were the reason for it." Somewhere, in another life, a little girl abandoned in the rain might have wept at the thought. But the woman she became, she simply smiled.